Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine computer memory that, well, operates at the blink of an eye, like your RAM, right?
Hmm.
But it holds on to every single bit of information, even when the power goes out.
Okay.
And it does all this while barely sipping any energy.
Sounds almost like science fiction, doesn't it?
Exactly. But there's this real buzz around a potentially revolutionary technology called Ultraram.
Right.
And we're diving deep into some fascinating research, this paper from the University of Lancaster, that's really got the tech world talking.
It really has. And our mission, in this deep dive is to try and understand the core principles behind Ultraram.
Yeah.
And explore why this specific research is generating quite so much excitement. But to really get why it's a big deal, we probably need a quick reminder of where our current memory tech, falls short.
Right, definitely. So we all know RAM, right? Random access memory. It's incredibly fast. You can grab any piece of data almost instantly.
Like having everything you're working on right there.
Oh, exactly, right on your desktop. But the downside, it's volatile. You switch off the power, and poof, it's all gone.
Yeah, that's because it uses these tiny electrical containers, or capacitors they're called, that constantly need recharging just to remember if they're storing a 1 or a 0.
Always needing that top up.
And then we have our persistent storage, things like solid-state drives, your SSDs.
That filing cabinets?
Kinda, yeah. They hold onto your data even when there's no power, and they're way quicker than those old spinning hard drives we used to have.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But they have their own limitations, especially in how they actually write and erase information.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Think of an SSD like maybe a notebook. You can write quickly on any page that's the right operation. And according to our source here, this takes a certain electrical push, seems like around 7.5 volts.
Which isn't tiny but manageable.
But here's the catch. To erase something, you can't just rub out a single word or even a whole page.
No, you have to erase an entire section at once. That's the block.
Right, the block. And that takes a much, much bigger electrical jolt, something like 20 volts.
Yeah, around 20 volts, it's a significant difference.
And the really intriguing part is the consequence of that high voltage, isn't it?
Absolutely. Repeatedly hitting those tiny memory cells with strong electrical pushes puts a lot of strain on them.
It wears them out.
Exactly. This strain limits how many times you can actually write and erase data. These are the famous program erase cycles. Eventually, those cells just start to degrade.
And that's why SSDs have all this really complex stuff going on behind the scenes, right? Like garbage collection and wear leveling.
Yeah, they're basically clever strategies trying to spread out that wear and tear across all the memory cells, trying to make the drive last longer.
It's like rotating your tires, but for data.
Sort of. And what's also interesting is that many SSDs even include a separate chunk of DRAM, that super fast but forgetful memory we just talked about.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, just to help manage all these complex operations, which of course adds to the overall cost of the drive.
Okay. So if we connect this back to the bigger picture, given all these complexities, these limitations of RAM and SSDs, the idea of a technology like Ultraram, the one detailed in this University of Lancaster paper from around January 5th, it becomes incredibly exciting.
It really does, because it aims to give us that speed and instant access of RAM, but with the long-term memory of an SSD.
Yeah.
All while trying to dodge these fundamental drawbacks.
Okay, let's get into the core of this Ultraram magic then, based on the abstract from that paper. First off, it's non-volatile.
Meaning it holds data without power. Check. Big tick for the SSD side.
Right, but it also promises ultra-fast speeds and incredibly low energy consumption.
Which sounds much more like RAM, maybe even better than RAM.
RAM on steroids, yeah.
So what's really novel here is the underlying science. The researchers talk about using electron storage in something called a floating gate.
A floating gate?
Yeah, you can sort of picture it like a tiny, tiny container for electrons that can hold them even when the power's off.
Okay.
And this storage is accessed through something they call a triple barrier resonate tunneling heterostructure.
Whoa. Okay, that's a technical mouthful.
It is. But the key insight, really, is this clever, innovative method they've developed for trapping and releasing electrons to represent the zeros and ones of data.
Gotcha. Now, this next part is what really jumped out at me, and I think it's crucial if this is ever going to be practical. They've actually implemented it on a silicon substrate.
Silicon. The bedrock of modern electronics.
Exactly. The same base material used for, almost all our chips. Using a material everyone already knows how to work with massively increases the chances of making this stuff cost-effectively someday.
That's a really important point. It bridges the gap from lab curiosity to potential mass production.
And the paper even gets into the nitty-gritty of how they grew these samples, like layer by precise layer, using a technique called molecular beam epitaxy. Very specific stuff.
Yeah, those growth details might be a bit deep for most, but what really stands out are the results they got from the individual memory cells they built.
Okay, what did they find?
Well, first, they achieved a really clear on-off state, for storing the zeros and ones. That's fundamental.
The basics.
But even more impressively, they were able to switch these states, program them with electrical pulses lasting less than 10 nanoseconds.
Less than 10 nanoseconds. That's incredibly quick.
It really is. Blazing fast.
Oh, hold on. It gets even better. The electrical push, the voltage they needed to make these switches.
How low?
Just 2.5 volts.
2.5. Seriously. Compare that to the SSD numbers.
Right. 7.5 volts to write on an SSD, and that massive 20 volts just to erase. 2.5 is tiny in comparison.
That's a huge difference. And they're claiming that this low voltage, combined with how tiny the memory cells are, results in switching energy that's dramatically lower.
Orders of magnitude lower, apparently, than both DRAM and flash memory.
Wow. That's a massive leap in efficiency.
Huge.
But the real insight here, I think, is that Ultraram's incredibly low voltage isn't just about saving battery life, though that's nice too.
What's the bigger deal then?
It fundamentally bypasses those wear and tear issues that plague SSDs. Remember the high voltage strain?
Yeah, the 20 volts doing the damage.
Exactly. By massively reducing that electrical stress on the memory cells, you inherently increase how many times they can be rewritten. The endurance goes way up.
So how much endurance are they talking?
Well, the researchers are reporting degradation-free operation for over 10 to the power of 7 programmable cycles.
That's 10 million cycles.
10 million, yeah. That's potentially a massive, massive advantage over current SSD technology.
Okay, 10 million cycles is impressive. But then there's this other claim.
Oh.
They're also claiming the data could be retained for over 1,000 years.
1,000 years. Okay, yeah, that definitely makes you pause.
Right. I mean, I have to say, that made me raise an eyebrow. How on earth do you even verify something like that?
You can't, not directly.
And like our source also pointed out, they've been working on this for about 7 years. 1,000 years is, well, it's a very, very long time to predict based on extrapolation.
That skepticism is completely understandable and, frankly, healthy. While 7 years of dedicated research is a very encouraging start, you're right, extensive long-term testing, real-world conditions, that's absolutely necessary to confirm a claim like a millennium of data retention.
Okay.
But, even if the actual retention falls significantly short of 1,000 years, maybe it's decades, maybe a century, the potential for much longer data storage compared to volatile RAM is still a major step forward.
Sure, true. So boiling it down, what does this all potentially mean for you, the listener?
Well, if Ultraram lives up to even just a portion of its potential, the implications are enormous.
They really are. That low voltage doesn't just mean your devices might last longer. It could also mean we might not need those complex garbage collection and wear leveling algorithms anymore.
The stuff that SSDs use to manage wear. Exactly. If the wear isn't really a major issue because the voltage is so low, you could potentially simplify the entire storage system, making it inherently more efficient.
That makes sense. The need for those intricate workarounds in SSDs is a direct result of the high voltages causing that physical degradation, right?
Precisely. So if you eliminate or drastically reduce that wear, it could pave the way for simpler, maybe faster, more efficient storage architectures.
Our source even mentions something about the NVMe key value command set.
Yeah, that was interesting. It suggested that kind of access model might be a really good fit for future storage systems using this type of ultra-durable fast memory. It potentially opens up new ways to interact with storage.
And, while the lower energy use is definitely a nice bonus, especially for mobile devices,
It is.
I think the real excitement here, as our source kind of highlights, is that combination of incredible speed and virtually unlimited endurance, all enabled by that low voltage.
Right. Imagine storage that's both super fast and lasts practically forever without needing all these complex software tricks just to keep it going.
It sounds amazing, but there's always a but, isn't there?
Usually. This raises a pretty fundamental question, though, and it echoes a point made in our source material.
Okay.
Even if Ultraram performs exactly as promised in the lab, our current computer systems, our architectures, might not be ideally designed to fully exploit its capabilities.
What do you mean?
Well, We've spent decades building systems around the specific trade-offs and limitations of DRAM and NAND flash.
So we're optimized for the old problems.
Kind of, yeah. Truly unlocking Ultraram's potential might require some significant rethinking of how we actually architect computers, how operating systems manage memory, how applications access data. It might need a more fundamental shift.
Okay, that's a big challenge, but also exciting. So let's try and bring it all together. Ultraram presents this really compelling potential future, right?
Definitely. A memory technology that could potentially merge the lightning-fast speed of RAM with the persistent, non-volatile nature of SSDs.
All while dramatically improving how long our devices last and how efficiently they use energy.
The key advantages seem pretty significant. Non-volatility, so your data is safe without power.
Check.
The potential for incredibly fast read and write operation.
Check.
A remarkably low power consumption.
The bonus.
Greatly improved endurance, leading to much longer-lasting devices.
Is very important.
And maybe the possibility of simpler, more efficient storage systems that don't need all that complex wear-leveling baggage.
Okay. So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Picture a future where that line, that distinction between your computer's short-term memory, its RAM, and its long-term storage, its SSD. What if that line just blurs? Or maybe even disappears completely? Universal memory. Exactly. What entirely new ways of computing could that unlock? Think about the possibilities for the smartphone in your hand, the laptop on your desk, even those massive data centers that power the internet.
It opens up a whole world of possibilities, doesn't it? Faster boot times, instant-on applications, maybe entirely new software architectures.
It's definitely something fascinating to consider as this research continues to develop. Makes you wonder what our devices might look like in, say, 10 or 20 years if this pans out.
Absolutely, a space worth watching.